Dr. Maya Wilson rubbed her tired eyes as she guided her 5-year-old daughter Zoe through the busy airport terminal. It was Friday afternoon, and after a grueling week of back-to-back surgeries at Memorial Hospital, she was ready for this flight to San Francisco. The medical conference where she would deliver the keynote speech was important, but Maya was equally excited about the short vacation she had planned with Zoe afterward. "Mommy, are we almost there?" Zoe asked, clutching her stuffed giraffe while Maya pulled their carry-on luggage behind them. "Almost, sweetheart. Just a little further to our gate," Maya replied with a smile, checking her watch. They were early, which was exactly how she liked it. At 38 years old, Maya had worked incredibly hard to get where she was. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood in Detroit, she had won scholarships through high school and college before attending medical school at Johns Hopkins. Neurology had captured her interest early, and now, 15 years into her career, she was recognized as one of the leading experts in pediatric neurological disorders. As they approached the gate, Maya noticed several eyes on her. She was used to it by now, a young black woman dressed in casual but expensive clothes, designer handbag over one shoulder, holding the hand of her daughter whose curly hair was styled in neat braids with colorful beads at the ends. Maya had learned long ago to ignore the stares, the assumptions, the quick judgments people made before knowing anything about her. "First-class passengers may now begin boarding," announced the gate attendant. Maya gathered their things. "That's us, Zoe. Ready for an adventure?" Zoe nodded excitedly, her beads clicking together as she bounced on her toes. "Can I have the window seat?" "Of course you can," Maya said, handing their boarding passes to the attendant who smiled warmly at them. "Enjoy your flight, Dr. Wilson," the attendant said, and Maya felt a small sense of satisfaction. It was nice to be recognized properly, even in such a small interaction. The first-class cabin was half empty when they boarded. Maya helped Zoe get settled by the window before placing their bags in the overhead compartment. The seats were spacious and comfortable, a splurge Maya allowed herself whenever she traveled for major speaking engagements. The extra cost was worth it for the additional rest and preparation time. "Look, Mommy, the planes are so tiny from here." Zoe pressed her face against the window, pointing at the smaller aircraft on the distant runways. "They do look small from up high, don't they?" Maya pulled out Zoe's activity book and crayons. "Here you go, sweetie. Why don't you color while we wait for takeoff?" Zoe took the book eagerly and began flipping through it to find a blank page. Maya took the moment of peace to review her presentation notes on her tablet. The conference organizers had asked her to speak about recent advances in treating childhood epilepsy, an area where her research team had made significant progress in the past year. The cabin slowly filled with other first-class passengers, mostly businessmen in suits, a few women in professional attire, and an elderly couple. Maya noticed a well-dressed older white woman with perfectly coiffed silver hair making her way down the aisle, checking seat numbers. The woman stopped beside their row, double-checked her boarding pass, and took the aisle seat next to Maya. She was perhaps in her 60s, wearing an expensive-looking cream blouse and tailored pants, with several gold bracelets jingling on her wrist. "Hello," Maya said politely. The woman nodded briefly, then looked at Zoe, who was happily coloring a purple elephant. A flicker of confusion crossed her face as she glanced between Maya and the child. "She's very well behaved," the woman commented, setting her designer purse under the seat in front of her. "Thank you," Maya replied. "Zoe loves flying." As the final passengers boarded, flight attendants began their pre-flight procedures. One stopped by their row to offer pre-takeoff beverages. "What would you like to drink, ma'am?" the flight attendant asked Maya. "Just water for now, thank you. An apple juice for my daughter, please." The attendant nodded and turned to the older woman, who requested a glass of white wine. As the attendant moved away, the older woman leaned toward Maya with what seemed like a friendly smile. "So," she said in a lowered voice, "when will you be returning to economy after getting the child settled?" Maya blinked, momentarily frozen by the woman's question. Had she really just asked when Maya would be returning to economy? As if she couldn't possibly belong in first class. "Excuse me?" Maya asked, giving the woman a chance to correct herself. The older woman smiled again, speaking a bit louder as if Maya hadn't heard her properly. "I was just wondering when you'll be heading back to your seat in economy. After the child is settled, of course." Maya took a deep breath, the kind she used before delivering difficult news to patients. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm Dr. Wilson, and this is my daughter Zoe. We're both seated in first class. The woman's eyes widened slightly. Her smile stiffened but didn't disappear. Oh, I see. I just assumed. Well, you know. But Maya did know. She knew exactly what the woman had assumed. That she couldn't possibly be a first-class passenger. That she must be the nanny to a child who, with her lighter complexion, might have been mistaken for white at a quick glance. No, I don't know, Maya said calmly. What did you assume? The woman's cheeks flushed pink. She waved her hand dismissively. It's nothing, dear. Just making sure everyone is in their proper place. These airlines can get so mixed up with seating arrangements sometimes. A man in a business suit seated across the aisle glanced over, clearly having overheard the exchange. He caught Maya's eye and gave a small shake of his head, as if apologizing for the woman's behavior. The flight attendant returned with their drinks, placing them carefully on their tray tables. Thank you, Maya said, helping Zoe with her apple juice to make sure it didn't spill. You're very welcome, Dr. Wilson, the attendant replied with a warm smile, emphasizing Maya's title just slightly. Maya wondered if she had overheard the conversation. Zoe, oblivious to the tension, continued coloring her elephant, now adding bright yellow stars around it. Mommy, look, it's a magic elephant that can fly in space. That's beautiful, sweetheart, Maya said, grateful for the distraction. She turned her attention to her daughter, pointing out details and asking questions about the elephant's space adventures. The older woman beside them sipped her wine in silence, occasionally glancing at them. After a few minutes, she cleared her throat. So you're a doctor? She asked, her tone suggesting surprise. Maya nodded. Yes, I'm a neurologist. I specialize in pediatric cases. How interesting, the woman replied. You must be quite smart. Where did you train? Johns Hopkins, Maya answered simply, already tired of the conversation. Impressive. You must have worked very hard, the woman said, her tone suggesting this was somehow unexpected. And is her father traveling with you? She nodded toward Zoe. Maya felt her patience wearing thin. The personal questions were inappropriate from a stranger, yet she maintained her composure. No, her father isn't traveling with us. The plane began to move, and the safety demonstration started. Maya was grateful for the interruption, turning her attention to making sure Zoe was watching the important parts about seatbelts and oxygen masks. As they taxied toward the runway, the woman leaned over again. I'm Elizabeth Harrington, by the way. My husband is a cardiologist at New York Presbyterian. Nice to meet you, Maya replied politely, not offering more conversation. So where are you and the little one headed in San Francisco? Elizabeth asked, seemingly determined to keep talking. Visiting family? I'm the keynote speaker at the National Medical Association conference, Maya replied, keeping her voice even, and then Zoe and I are taking a few days to visit the city. Elizabeth's eyebrows shot up. Keynote speaker? Well, isn't that something? And at such a young age, too. The plane accelerated down the runway, and Zoe squealed with delight as they lifted into the air. Maya held her hand, pointing out the shrinking buildings below. Once they reached cruising altitude, Maya pulled out her tablet again, hoping Elizabeth would take the hint that she wanted to focus on her work. But Elizabeth wasn't done. It must be difficult, she said, lowering her voice, managing childcare with such a demanding career. Is the girl's regular nanny meeting you in San Francisco? Before Maya could answer, the flight attendant appeared beside them. Dr. Wilson, the captain asked me to give you this, she said, handing Maya a small envelope. He read your article in the New England Journal of Medicine and wanted to express his admiration. Maya accepted the envelope with a surprised smile. That's very kind. Please thank him for me. As the flight attendant moved away, Elizabeth stared at Maya with new interest. The dynamics between them had just shifted, but Maya could see in the woman's eyes that the assumptions were far from over. Maya opened the envelope from the captain, finding a brief handwritten note. Asterisk, Dr. Wilson, your research on neuroplasticity in pediatric patients changed how we treated my nephew's condition. Thank you for your brilliant work. Enjoy your flight. Captain Stevens asterisk. A small smile touched Maya's lips as she read the note. These moments helped balance the frustration she often experienced. She tucked the note into her purse, aware that Elizabeth was watching her closely. That was unexpected, Maya said quietly, more to herself than to her seatmate. What did he say? Elizabeth asked, leaning slightly to peek at Maya's purse. Just a kind note about my research, Maya replied, keeping the details private. She turned back to Zoe, who had abandoned her coloring book and was now playing with a small doll she pulled from her backpack. Your daughter seems very well behaved, Elizabeth commented, her tone suggesting surprise again. Did you adopt her? Maya felt her jaw tighten. The questions were becoming increasingly invasive and inappropriate. She looked directly at Elizabeth. No, I didn't adopt her. Zoe is my biological daughter. Elizabeth's eyes widened slightly. Oh, I just thought, because she's a bit lighter than you. The businessman across the aisle, who had clearly been listening, visibly winced and shook his head again. Maya took another deep breath. For Zoe's sake, she would remain calm. Genetics is fascinating, isn't it? Children can express such a range of features from their parents. Yes, of course, Elizabeth replied, looking flustered. I didn't mean to imply anything. The flight attendant returned to take their lunch orders. We have grilled salmon with quinoa or beef tenderloin with roasted vegetables today, she informed them. The salmon sounds perfect, Maya said. And chicken fingers for my daughter, please, if you have them. Of course, Dr. Wilson. We have a children's meal prepared for Miss Zoe. The flight attendant smiled warmly at the little girl, who beamed back. Elizabeth ordered the beef tenderloin, then turned back to Maya once the attendant left. They're certainly treating you well. Do you fly this airline often? When I can, Maya replied. I have status with them. Status? Elizabeth raised an eyebrow. You must travel quite a bit then. For conferences and consulting, yes. Maya pulled out her phone and checked her emails, hoping again to signal that she wanted some quiet time. Elizabeth wasn't deterred. So how did you afford medical school? Scholarships? Maya looked up from her phone, meeting Elizabeth's gaze directly. Yes, I had scholarships and student loans, like most doctors. That's wonderful, Elizabeth said. It's so important that those opportunities exist for people from all backgrounds. Maya noticed how Elizabeth hesitated, clearly choosing her words carefully now. The woman was trying to sound progressive while continuing to make assumptions about Maya's background. I agree completely, Maya replied evenly. Education should be accessible to everyone with the ability and dedication to pursue it. The flight attendant arrived with their meals, setting up their tray tables with white linen cloths. Zoe clapped excitedly when she saw her chicken fingers and fruit cup. Thank you, Zoe said, remembering her manners without prompting. You're very welcome, young lady, the attendant replied. She placed Maya's salmon in front of her. Enjoy your meal, Dr. Wilson. As they began eating, a younger flight attendant stopped by their row. Dr. Wilson, I hate to disturb your meal, but there's a passenger in economy experiencing severe vertigo. The captain was wondering if you might be able to take a quick look. Maya nodded immediately. Of course, she turned to Zoe. Mommy needs to help someone, sweetheart. I'll be right back. Keep eating your lunch, okay? Okay, Mommy. Can I have your cookie if you don't want it? Zoe asked, eyeing the chocolate chip cookie on Maya's tray. Maya laughed. We'll see. She stood up and followed the flight attendant. Elizabeth watched, clearly surprised. As Maya walked away, she heard Elizabeth ask another flight attendant, is she really a doctor? She seems so young. The attendant's response was clear and firm. Yes, ma'am. Dr. Wilson is one of the top neurologists in the country. Maya spent 15 minutes in economy, examining an elderly man suffering from benign positional vertigo. She showed his wife a simple maneuver to help relieve his symptoms and recommended he see his regular doctor after landing. When she returned to her seat, Zoe was happily watching a cartoon on the in-flight entertainment system, and Elizabeth was flipping through a magazine. Everything okay back there? Elizabeth asked as Maya settled in. Yes, just a case of vertigo. Nothing serious, Maya said, returning to her meal, which the attendants had kept warm. After finishing her meal, Maya helped Zoe wipe her hands and face. The little girl had managed to get ketchup on her cheeks, despite her mother's careful supervision. Maya smiled as she gently cleaned her daughter's face with a damp napkin. "All done, Mommy," Zoe announced proudly. "Good job eating all your chicken," Maya praised. "Do you want to watch another movie, or would you like to nap for a bit?" "Movie, please," Zoe said without hesitation. Maya helped her daughter select an animated film about talking animals that Zoe had already watched at least 10 times at home. Within minutes, the child was completely absorbed, her small headphones slightly too big for her head. The flight attendant cleared their trays, and Maya took the opportunity to review her presentation notes again. She was halfway through when Elizabeth spoke up. "So what exactly is your specialty?" she asked, sipping a second glass of wine that had appeared during Maya's absence. "My husband deals primarily with cardiac stents and valve replacements." Maya lowered her tablet. "I specialize in pediatric neurological disorders, particularly epilepsy and movement disorders. My research focuses on neuroplasticity in developing brains." "Fascinating," Elizabeth said, though her tone suggested limited understanding. "And you're giving a big talk about this in San Francisco?" "Yes, the keynote at the National Medical Association conference," Maya confirmed. "We developed some promising new treatment protocols for medication-resistant epilepsy in children." "The National Medical Association," Elizabeth repeated, her forehead wrinkling slightly. Isn't that the Black Doctors Group?" Maya kept her expression neutral. "The NNA was founded by black physicians who were excluded from the American Medical Association, yes. Today it represents physicians of all ethnicities who are committed to eliminating health disparities." Elizabeth nodded quickly. Of course. Health disparities are so important. My husband and I donate to a charity that helps underprivileged children get medical care." Maya simply nodded, not wanting to engage further on the topic of charity when Elizabeth seemed to equate black with underprivileged so easily. A moment of silence passed between them, which was broken when a middle-aged man from across the aisle leaned over. "Excuse me, I couldn't help overhearing. Are you Dr. Maya Wilson from Memorial Hospital?" he asked. Maya turned to him, surprised. "Yes, I am." The man extended his hand. "Jason Pavel. I'm a radiologist at UCSF. I read your paper on neuroimaging techniques for pediatric seizures." "Brilliant work." Maya shook his hand, genuinely pleased. "Thank you, Dr. Pavel. We've seen promising results implementing those protocols." "I'm attending the NMA conference too," he continued. "Looking forward to your keynote. Will you be discussing the neural pathway remapping techniques you mentioned in your last publication?" "That's actually a central part of my presentation," Maya confirmed with a smile. "We have 3 years of follow-up data now." "Fantastic. I'll definitely be in the front row," Dr. Patel said enthusiastically. Their conversation continued for several minutes, diving into technical aspects of neuroimaging that clearly left Elizabeth bewildered. Maya found herself relaxing as she discussed her work with a colleague who understood and respected her expertise. When Dr. Patel returned to his seat to take a phone call, Elizabeth cleared her throat. "You certainly seem to have quite the reputation in your field," she observed, her tone suggesting she was reassessing Maya. "I've been fortunate to work with excellent research teams," Maya replied modestly. Elizabeth studied her for a moment. "And how do you manage it all? The career, the child, the travel. Without a husband, I mean." Maya had to stop herself from sighing aloud. Even after witnessing her professional recognition, Elizabeth still viewed her primarily through the lens of her marital status. "The same way many professional parents do," Maya answered. "With careful planning, reliable support systems, and a lot of coffee." She kept her tone light, though her patience was wearing thin. "It must be challenging, though," Elizabeth persisted. "Children really need stability. My husband and I raised 3 children, and I stayed home until they were in high school. It was a sacrifice, but that's what mothers do." Maya felt her jaw clench again. The implication was clear. Elizabeth believed proper motherhood meant sacrificing career ambitions. "Every family finds what works for them," Maya said diplomatically. "Zoe is thriving, and she sees that her mother is helping other children through her work. That's an important lesson, too." Elizabeth looked skeptical. "But surely you must feel guilty sometimes, being away from her so much. Children grow up so fast." "You must have gotten quite lucky," Elizabeth remarked as the plane began its final approach to San Francisco International Airport. She gestured vaguely at their surroundings. To afford first-class tickets on a doctor's salary, especially with a child to support. Maya turned slowly to face the older woman, her expression carefully controlled. For the past 2 hours, she had maintained her composure through a steady stream of microaggressions and thinly veiled insults. But this latest comment, implying that Maya's success must be due to luck rather than hard work, was the breaking point. Lucky, Maya repeated softly. Well, yes, Elizabeth continued, oblivious to the shift in Maya's demeanor. These seats are quite expensive. My husband and I only fly first class when we use our points. He's very careful with our money, you know. Dr. Patel, who had been pretending not to listen, glanced over with raised eyebrows. Another passenger, a young black woman in a business suit seated in the row ahead, turned slightly in her seat. Maya checked on Zoe, who had fallen asleep during the movie, her head resting against the window. The little girl's chest rose and fell with deep, even breaths, her stuffed giraffe clutched tightly in her arms. Mrs. Harrington, Maya began, her voice quiet but firm, I'd like to address something that's been happening throughout this flight. Elizabeth blinked, looking genuinely surprised. What do you mean? Since the moment you sat down beside me, you've made assumptions about who I am and what I'm capable of, Maya explained. You assumed I was a nanny. You questioned my relationship with my daughter. You've expressed surprise at my education, my career, and now, my financial situation. Elizabeth's cheeks flushed pink. I was just making conversation. I didn't mean anything by it. Perhaps not consciously, Maya acknowledged. But these innocent assumptions reflect deeper biases that many people of color experience daily. The young woman in the row ahead nodded slightly, still listening. I'm not lucky to be in first class, Maya continued, keeping her voice low so as not to wake Zoe. I'm the head of pediatric neurology at one of the country's top hospitals. I've published over 30 research papers. I've developed treatment protocols that have improved outcomes for thousands of children with neurological disorders. Elizabeth shifted uncomfortably in her seat. I didn't mean to suggest. And my daughter, Maya went on, is growing up seeing that her mother has earned her place in this world through dedication and hard work. She's learning that she deserves to take up space anywhere she chooses to be, whether that's in first class or in an operating room or in a boardroom. The plane bumped slightly as it hit a patch of turbulence. Maya paused, checking on Zoe, who stirred but didn't wake. I've responded to your questions politely, Maya said. I've given you the benefit of the doubt. But I want you to understand that what feels like casual curiosity to you feels like scrutiny and judgment to me. Several nearby passengers were now openly listening. Dr. Patel nodded in agreement with Maya's words. I don't think this is really necessary, Elizabeth said, lowering her voice and glancing around at the attentive faces. I was just being friendly. True friendship, true connection, begins with respect, Maya replied calmly. With seeing people for who they are, not who we assume them to be based on the color of their skin. The plane dipped lower as they approached the runway. The flight attendant, who had been particularly kind to Maya throughout the flight, walked by, giving her an encouraging smile. I wasn't trying to be disrespectful, Elizabeth insisted, though her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. Maya nodded. I believe you. Most biases operate below the level of conscious awareness. That's why it's important to point them out, not to shame you, but to help all of us grow and do better. The wheels of the plane touched down on the runway with a slight screech, and Zoe's eyes fluttered open. Are we there, Mommy? She asked sleepily. Yes, sweetheart. We've arrived in San Francisco, Maya answered, smoothing her daughter's hair. As the plane taxied to the gate, a heavy silence hung between Maya and Elizabeth. The older woman stared straight ahead, her lips pressed into a thin line. Finally, as the seatbelt sign dinged off and passengers began to stand, Elizabeth turned to Maya. I apologize if I offended you, she said stiffly. That wasn't my intention. I appreciate that, Maya replied with genuine sincerity. Intentions matter, but so do impacts. I hope our conversation gives you something to think about. As passengers prepared to exit the plane, Maya helped Zoe gather her coloring books and toys, tucking them neatly into the child's backpack. Elizabeth remained silent beside them, her face still flushed from their exchange. Dr. Wilson. Maya looked up to see the flight attendant who had been serving their section throughout the flight. The captain asked if you would mind waiting until the other passengers have deplaned. He'd like to speak with you briefly. Of course, Maya replied, curious about the request. Elizabeth stood up, collecting her designer handbag and avoiding eye contact with Maya. Without another word, she joined the line of passengers moving toward the exit. Dr. Patel paused as he passed their row. Dr. Wilson, it was a pleasure meeting you. I'm looking forward to your presentation tomorrow. Thank you, Dr. Patel. I look forward to seeing you there, Maya responded with a genuine smile. As the cabin emptied, the young black woman who had been seated in front of them lingered, then approached Maya. Excuse me, she said, her voice slightly hesitant. I couldn't help overhearing your conversation. My name is Tiana Johnson. I'm a second-year medical student at UCSF. It's nice to meet you, Tiana, Maya said warmly, shaking the young woman's hand. I just wanted to say thank you, Tiana continued. The way you handled that situation was... She paused, searching for the right word. It was masterful. I've experienced similar assumptions, but I never know how to respond without seeming angry or defensive. Maya nodded in understanding. It takes practice, and honestly, sometimes it's okay to be angry. Would it be possible to get your email? Tiana asked. I'm interested in neurology, and I'd love to learn more about your work. Of course, Maya replied, pulling out a business card from her wallet. Feel free to reach out anytime. I'm always happy to mentor students with an interest in neuroscience. Tiana took the card with a beaming smile. Thank you so much, Dr. Wilson. You have no idea what this means to me. After Tiana left, Maya noticed that several other passengers had paused to watch their interaction. An older man in a business suit nodded respectfully at Maya before exiting the plane. Mommy, why did everyone leave but us? Zhu asked, bouncing slightly in her seat. The pilot wants to say hello to us, Maya explained. Just a few more minutes, okay? Soon, the cabin door opened, and the captain emerged, followed by two other flight attendants. Captain Stevens was a tall man with gray hair at his temples and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. Dr. Wilson, thank you for your patience, he said, extending his hand. I wanted to personally thank you for assisting our passenger earlier. The crew told me you handled the situation expertly. It was no trouble at all, Maya assured him. And I also wanted to thank you for something else, the captain continued, his tone becoming more serious. My grandson was diagnosed with a rare form of epilepsy last year. Your research papers were among those his doctors studied when developing his treatment plan. He's responding well to the new medication protocol you pioneered. Maya's eyes widened in surprise. I'm so glad to hear that. That's why we do the research, for children like your grandson. Indeed, the captain nodded. He glanced at the now empty cabin. I also want to apologize for what you experienced on this flight. One of our flight attendants overheard much of the conversation between you and the other passenger. The flight attendant who had been serving them stepped forward. We strive to make all our passengers feel welcome and respected, she said. What that woman said to you was unacceptable. You handled it with such grace, added another attendant. When she assumed you were the nanny, I nearly spilled the drinks I was serving. Maya smiled, touched by their concern. Unfortunately, it's not an uncommon experience. What matters is how we respond to these moments. They're opportunities for education. Well, your response was exemplary, the captain said. In fact, several passengers have already mentioned it to our gate agents. One gentleman said, and I quote, I've never seen someone shut down racism so effectively while still being kind. I wasn't trying to make a statement, Maya admitted. I just reached my limit with being polite about harmful assumptions. Sometimes that's exactly when the most powerful statements are made, the captain replied. When they come from a place of genuine truth. So tugged at Maya's sleeve, growing impatient. Mommy, can we go see the big bridge now? As she and Zoe walked through the jet bridge hand in hand, Maya reflected on the unexpected impact of standing up for herself. What had begun as an uncomfortable encounter had transformed into something meaningful, not just for her, but perhaps for everyone who had witnessed it. Maya and Zoe collected their luggage and made their way through the busy San Francisco International Airport. After their eventful flight, Maya was looking forward to checking into their hotel and having a quiet evening before tomorrow's conference. Dr. Wilson. Maya turned to see Tiana Johnson, the medical student from the flight, waving at her near the exit doors. I hope you don't mind, Tiana said, catching up to them. I wanted to ask if I could share what happened on our flight on social media. Your response to that woman was so powerful, and I think it could help a lot of people navigate similar situations. Maya hesitated. She had never sought attention for herself. Her work, her research, those were what she wanted to be known for, not an uncomfortable encounter on an airplane. I understand if you'd rather I didn't. Tiana added quickly, noticing Maya's hesitation. It's not that, Maya explained. I just hadn't thought about it becoming a public story. Zoe tugged at her mother's hand. Mommy, I'm hungry. Just a moment, sweetheart, Maya said gently before turning back to Tiana. What exactly would you share? Just the basics. A first-class passenger assumed a black female doctor was a nanny, made several inappropriate comments, and received an educational response rather than an angry one. I wouldn't use names or specific details without your permission. Maya considered this for a moment. Perhaps her experience could help others. All right, she finally agreed. Just please be respectful with how you frame it. Absolutely, Tiana promised, her face brightening. Thank you, Dr. Wilson, and I'll definitely be at your keynote tomorrow. As Tiana walked away, Maya hailed a taxi to take them to their hotel in downtown San Francisco. During the ride, Zoe pressed her face against the window, marveling at the steep hills and colorful buildings. The houses look like they're going to slide down, Mommy, she exclaimed. Maya smiled, pushing the airplane incident from her mind and focusing on her daughter's excitement. At the hotel, they were greeted warmly at the check-in desk. Dr. Wilson, we've been expecting you, the receptionist said. As one of our conference keynote speakers, you've been upgraded to a suite with a view of the bay. That's very kind, thank you, Maya replied, pleasantly surprised. Their suite was spacious and elegant, with large windows offering a stunning view of the Golden Gate Bridge in the distance. Zoe immediately claimed the window seat, pressing her nose against the glass. Look, Mommy, the bridge is red, not golden. Maya laughed. You're right, they named it after the Golden Gate Strait, not because of its color. After ordering room service for dinner, Maya settled at the desk to review her presentation one final time while Zoe watched cartoons on the television. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her colleague back at Memorial Hospital. Asterisk, how was the flight? Ready for tomorrow, asterisk. Asterisk, flight was interesting. Ready as I'll ever be, asterisk, Maya replied. Just as she was about to put her phone away, an email notification appeared from Dr. Patel. Asterisk, subject. You've started something important, asterisk. Curious, Maya opened the email. Asterisk, Dr. Wilson, asterisk. Asterisk, I wanted to let you know that your interaction with that woman on our flight has already made waves. The medical student who spoke to you afterward posted about it, and it's been shared hundreds of times in just a few hours. Many physicians of color are sharing similar experiences, asterisk. Asterisk, I believe your response will be discussed at the diversity panel tomorrow. Just wanted to give you a heads up. Your dignity and poise in that situation were remarkable, asterisk. Asterisk, looking forward to your keynote, asterisk. Asterisk, Jason Patel, MD, asterisk. Maya stared at the email in disbelief. She opened her social media app and searched her name. Sure enough, Tiana's post appeared near the top. Asterisk, today I witnessed something powerful. A black female neurologist was repeatedly mistaken for a nanny on our flight, even after clarifying her identity. Instead of responding with anger, which would have been justified, she delivered a masterclass in addressing bias. She was firm but educational, dignified but direct. This is how change happens, one conversation at a time. Hashtag medicine while black, hashtag Maya Wilson, asterisk. The post already had thousands of likes and shares. Comments poured in from people sharing similar experiences. Asterisk, as a black female surgeon, I get asked when the doctor is coming at least once a week. Asterisk. Asterisk, I was mistaken for housekeeping while wearing my white coat in the hospital. Asterisk. Asterisk, thank you for sharing this. I never know how to respond in these situations without being labeled angry or difficult. Asterisk. Maya's phone began ringing. It was Dr. Vivian Taylor, the conference organizer. Maya, I hope I'm not disturbing you, Dr. Taylor said when Maya answered. Not at all, Vivian. Is everything okay with tomorrow's schedule? The conference hall was packed the next morning. Maya stood backstage, reviewing her notes one final time while a volunteer helped adjust her microphone. Through the curtain, she could see hundreds of medical professionals taking their seats, more than she had expected for her keynote address. Dr. Wilson, the conference coordinator, approached with a tablet in hand. I wanted to show you something before you go on. She handed Maya the tablet, which displayed a trending social media hashtag. #DignityAndRace. Below it were thousands of posts sharing Tiana's original story, along with new accounts of similar experiences and responses. Your airplane encounter has sparked quite a movement, the coordinator explained. People are sharing their own stories of how they've responded to bias with dignity and grace, inspired by what you did. Maya scrolled through a few posts, amazed at how quickly her experience had resonated with so many. We've added 2 minutes to your introduction, the coordinator continued. Dr. Taylor wants to acknowledge what happened before your technical presentation begins. Is that all right? Maya nodded, feeling a mix of nervousness and determination. Yes, that's fine. In the front row of the audience, Maya spotted Zoe sitting between Dr. Patel and Tiana Johnson. The conference had arranged for a student volunteer to watch over Zoe during the presentation. Her daughter waved excitedly, and Maya waved back, drawing strength from her presence. 5 minutes, Dr. Wilson, a stagehand announced. Maya took a deep breath and closed her eyes, centering herself. When she opened them again, she noticed something unexpected in the third row. Elizabeth Harrington, a woman from the plane, sitting beside a distinguished-looking man who must be her husband. Before Maya could process this surprise, Dr. Vivian Taylor stepped onto the stage and approached the podium. Good morning, colleagues, she began. It is my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Maya Wilson, head of pediatric neurology at Memorial Hospital and a pioneer in the treatment of medication-resistant epilepsy in children. The audience applauded as Dr. Taylor continued with Maya's professional achievements. But before Dr. Wilson shares her groundbreaking research, I'd like to acknowledge something many of you may have already heard about through social media. Yesterday, on her flight to this conference, Dr. Wilson experienced something that many professionals of color know all too well, having her identity questioned, her credentials doubted, and her success attributed to luck rather than hard work. A murmur rippled through the audience. Maya saw Elizabeth shift uncomfortably in her seat. Instead of responding with justified anger, Dr. Wilson provided what many are calling a masterclass in addressing bias with dignity and grace. Her response has sparked an important conversation about how we recognize and respond to biases in our profession and beyond. Dr. Wilson, thank you not only for your contributions to medicine, but for showing us all how to turn difficult moments into opportunities for growth. The audience erupted in applause, many rising to their feet. Maya saw Zoe clapping enthusiastically, but the child clearly didn't understand exactly what was happening. Taking a deep breath, Maya walked onto the stage. The applause continued for nearly a minute before she could begin. Thank you, Dr. Taylor, for that generous introduction, Maya began when the audience finally quieted. I'm here today to discuss our team's recent advances in treating pediatric epilepsy, but first, I'd like to address what happened yesterday. Maya paused, her eyes scanning the audience before briefly settling on Elizabeth. What I experienced on that flight wasn't unique or unusual. It's something many people face daily. The assumptions about who belongs where, who can achieve what, and who deserves recognition are often invisible to those who don't experience them, but they create very real barriers. The room was completely silent now, every face focused on her words. I responded the way I did, not to shame anyone, because I believe in the power of honest conversation to create change. We all carry biases. They're part of being human. What matters is how we respond when those biases are brought to our attention. Maya noticed Elizabeth's husband leaning over to whisper something to his wife, who nodded slowly. As medical professionals, we're trained to revise our diagnosis when new information emerges. We can apply that same principle to our social interactions. being willing to adjust our assumptions when evidence contradicts them. She smiled, looking at Zoe in the front row. I want my daughter to grow up in a world where she's judged by her character and capabilities,